follow along with the session. So I'm afraid I have missed your opening words. I hope you can hear me, see me, and also see my screen. Can someone confirm that, please?
Yep, we're all good.
Wonderful. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Liz, for having me on the session today. Very good also that all of you made it to this first session, or at least the first block of sessions of the week. So sorry to not be there in person. We would not have had these technical difficulties, perhaps, but on the upside, I'm also not stuck in the registration queue right now. So, and I can still be here. My name is Rick Hogeboom. I'm sorry, maybe if you already introduced me, Liz, very shortly. My name is Rick Hogeboom. I'm the director to the Water Footprint Network, and I'll take a few minutes to give you a very short, a bird's eye overview of the dynamics of virtual water trade. Before we dive into the content, just one sentence about the Water Footprint Network. We are a knowledge-based center based out of the Netherlands. We have a mission to use the water footprint concept to promote the transition towards sustainable, fair, and efficient use of water resources worldwide. One of the types of activities that we do is data and knowledge dissemination, and I'll share some insights of some studies that we did today. For those of you who are familiar with the history of virtual water, the concept and the study of virtual water, you will know that the late Professor Tony Allen dubbed the term virtual water first already many, many years ago. And it was popularized by the other late professor, Professor Arjen Hoekstra, who built it into the water footprint concept and the methodology to assess water footprints. And although these two intellectual giants, I may say, are no longer among us, their ideas are still here for us to benefit from. I don't have time to go into all the details. For that, I refer you to the Water Footprint Assessment Manual available from our website, waterfootprint.org. But I do think it is important to understand that if we want to analyze anything that has to do with virtual water flows, it all starts with understanding our water footprint. How much water does it take or cost to produce a good or service at the place of production? Now, this water footprint does not only give us a number of the water used, so in liters or in gallons, but it also indicates where and when the water is being used and also from what source. So very basic, we typically distinguish between these three sources, green, blue, and gray, where green refers to rainwater that doesn't become runoff, very important for food production. Blue water refers to surface and groundwater, and that includes irrigation water. And then gray water is a measure for water pollution. So that would be the basic to understand how much water is being used in a particular location at a particular time. But it doesn't tell you yet who ultimately benefits from that water use. For instance, because those users enjoyed the consumption of the final goods or services that have taken these green, blue, and gray resources somewhere else. Now, there's a whole methodology to trace and to define how these water using goods and services are produced first. How much water does it take in the place of origin? Then how they are traded and finally consumed, and how to trace that. Now, some products will be produced and consumed domestically, meaning they are consumed also in the country where they were produced, while others travel a great distance before they arrive at their final destination or user. And from the blocks, you can tell there's a whole array of different kind of definitions you can attach to that. But that's the basis of it. I'll leave the slides with Liz and WRI for your later reference if you'd like. And I also don't have time to go into too much detail here, but just wanted to show this rather iconic first study that we did on virtual water flows across global trade, where you can see the big arrows that indicate the largest virtual water flows that we have on Earth. The colors of the country also have a meaning where green countries, sorry, not green water, green countries are net exporters of virtual water, which means that they provide the world with embedded water, and the red countries are net importers of water, so they are on the net receiving end of the water balance. The first question that Liz and the team posed to me is then, but why is then trade increasing water stress in places far away from consumers? Well, the ultimate answer, or ultimate driver, if you will, of these virtual trades is that goods and services consumed originate from areas where water is scarce. Or if we put it differently, if goods and services are produced in areas affected by water scarcity and they are then exported, then an unsustainable virtual water flow emerges. Right, as the background map in this map that you see here, we developed for the science-based targets. It illustrates all these red basins where there is already water scarcity, on which I'm sure Liz also spoke to in the opening comments. And many of these river systems face water scarcity. So all exported goods originating from these basins thus constitute a trade-driven scarcity enhancer. Um, Recently, we were commissioned by the World Bank to have a closer look at how these dynamics in virtual water trade have developed over time. And it really, it's a rich study. It really makes me very enthusiastic. Of course, I can only show you a glance of these results. They will be described in more detail in the forthcoming World Bank's Global Water Monitoring Report, due probably somewhere towards the end of this year. But a few highlights that I can already share. The first, what you see in the graph on the left, is that the water footprint, so the basis of all virtual water studies, has grown considerably over time. On par with GDP, so there's no decoupling yet with growth and water consumption. Most of this increase was driven by agriculture. That also may not come as a big surprise. Also, even though the total footprint increased massively per capita, so per person, the water footprint actually came down a little bit by about 10% since 1990. So on average, the global citizen now uses around 3,200 liters of water per day. Still a massive amount, of course, but a little bit lower than it was. I already alluded to the importance of agriculture, and we found that actually the unit water footprints of crops, so the amount of drops that we need per crop, we need fewer drops per crops over time. We have become a little bit more efficient here, but regionally there are still very high shares of low efficient crop production, where we are really wasting a lot of water. Now, if we then focus on the blue water for a second only, we also quantified that 2/3, so that's a substantial part of our total blue water consumption, is already in areas that are water scarce, moderate to severely water scarce. And what's even worse, and let that sink in for a second, 94% we found, 94%, so almost all of the additional water that we have been used since 1990, so in the past 30 years, we took from areas that are already water scarce. So all our new developments in water resources, if you will, for blue water are in areas that are water scarce. So if we take those two dimensions, if you will, together, so on the one hand, we waste a lot of water by using it inefficiently in many places, but we also overuse water in many places by taking it from scarce basins. We quantified that 2/3 of our blue water footprint of blue water consumption, as illustrated in this little map to the right, is in water scarce areas under low efficient production, right? 2/3 of our water consumption is inefficient and unsustainable. Now, that is the basis that then feeds into these trade analyses to see where it ends up. And again, I won't go into too much detail, but we fed these water footprints of production into an environmentally extended input-output model to see where these inefficient, water scarcity-inducing flows end up. And we estimate that about 20% of the global blue water resources are going virtual, right? So 1 in 5 liters of water that is being used are used for goods and services that go into trade, into export. It's 26% for the green water resources. So that means that the rest, 80% for blue or 75% for green water, is consumed domestically in goods and services that are produced and consumed domestically, locally. Now, just for the statistics, the top exporters of these really water critical flows, right? So that's how we would label them if they are inefficient virtual water flows from water scarce areas, moreover. The top exporters of such goods and services would be Pakistan, India, and the United States. And the top importers of these water critical virtual water flows, so who enjoy the fruits of these unsustainable flows, would be China and the United States. Now, of course, there's much more to it. We can dive down at the level of the sector of products even, but we don't have the time to go into that. Maybe there's time in the breakout where we might also focus a little bit more on some initiatives that really delve down into specific value chains. I just wanted to highlight here the Fair Water Footprint Declaration and the Science-Based Targets as two industry-initiated initiatives where we can really try to make a difference on transparency and traceability of these virtual water flows to see if we can make them more fair, efficient, and sustainable. So hopefully that was still within time, Liz. Thank you so much.
Rick, could you stop sharing your screen, please?
I think I have stopped sharing my screen. At least I'm not sharing it anymore.
Yeah, all good now. Thank you. seen in the forest sector is it's important to engage with all supply chain actors, including those on the ground. Often they're not really included in efforts to create policy interventions or to understand the implications of those interventions on them. And the importance of incorporating digital public infrastructure and inclusive data governance. Digital public infrastructure is the effort to not have everyone build their own road, but for us all to pool our investment to build roads together. And we can still use individual cars to drive on them, but we don't necessarily want everyone to have a road next to another road, next to another road that we all invest in and build separately. That's inefficient and it doesn't solve the problem. Inclusive data governance is important for the incorporation of the interests and needs of smallholders and other vulnerable actors in measures to improve data management and generation. So for instance, if you are going to map smallholders, do they know it? Are they giving you permission to map them? Do they receive a copy of the data? Do they own the data? And can they use that data for something else, such as monitoring and tracking yield, getting land tenure for the land that they own or that they use, checking weather and harvest forecasts, understanding price variations over time, etc. So are there things that we can do with that data that also benefits them and therefore gives them a stake in this effort? With that, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to share these lessons. My information is on the slide. If you have any questions or would like to ask any other sort of follow-up questions on the report or the findings, I'm happy to talk to you. And thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, thanks so much. We can stop sharing that screen. And then can anyone on the chat online just let us know if you can hear us in the room? Yeah, if anyone can hear us, just put in the chat, please. All good? Okay, great. Thanks so much. And we can skip to the next slide. Okay. Okay, Meg, please. Yeah, it's right on.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Latulière. I'm a senior research fellow at the Stockholm Environment Institute, and I'm also the research and development lead at Trace. And I'm going to talk about how Trace's approach really to not only raise awareness, but also set and even change, in some cases, agendas with respect to deforestation and supply chains. So Trace is a science-based initiative which is focused on increasing the transparency of agricultural commodity supply chains, focusing specifically on deforestation in supply chains. Now, the initiative is led out of the Stockholm Environment Institute and Global Canopy, and we have about 10 years of experience now with deforestation in supply chains, and there's a lot that we can learn in the virtual water trade space now. And the first learning lesson, I guess we could say, is that transparency is not just about traceability. It's about quite a few building blocks, pieces of information, data sets that need to be connected. We need information on traceability, of course, but also information on transactions and impacts. But all of this needs to be anchored in policy, linked to activity reporting and also ways of measuring the effectiveness of these policies. It's not about traceability for traceability sake or transparency for transparency's sake. What we are looking for is really positive change on the ground. And Trace is based its work on the development of a methodology that we've perfected over the years. And what we're after is connected data sets that can quantify the amount of deforestation, in commodity supply chains, but we're not so much interested in 1, 2, or even 10 companies. We want to map the entire sector, so all of the actors, all of the production of a given commodity market, and then link that to policies and deforestation commitments, for instance, in order to assess the effectiveness of those commitments. Then the data is made openly available on our website, our brand new website, trace.earth, where you can navigate some visualizations that help you sort of get to the nitty-gritty of the information from these supply chains. And if we look at this example, which is the exports of Brazilian soy in 2020, you can see on the left all the municipalities that produced soy in 2020. On the right-hand side, the countries that imported soy in 2020, and we've focused or filtered the imports of the European Union and linked that to the amount of deforestation that's associated with those imports. So that's roughly 31,000 hectares of deforestation. And in the center, you see all the actors, the different companies that are linked to this supply chain and have deforestation or that are exposed to deforestation in their own supply chain. So what we have here is a mix of data at the right resolution and scale. Our preferred resolution is the jurisdictional level, so a municipality, a department, where you could overlap the deforestation in that municipality so that you can make those connections. We map now roughly 70% of global forest risk commodity supply chains. I invite you to go to our website so you can have a look at these in more detail. But now we're expanding new frontiers. We're interested in including virtual water trade through the water footprint, and this is a new frontier that I'm leading as part of the R&D team. And what I'd like to share now is just some initial results on the first row of these building blocks, and then ask you sort of, what is that second row really? How are we going to anchor this information in policy and for what purpose? So we can think perhaps this as the next generation of virtual water trade data and the importance of making this available openly for everyone to assess and analyze. So we're focusing first on Brazilian soy and beef production and exports. And this is just a different version of the previous visualization. So this is now a map where each municipality has an amount of blue water consumed for both soy and beef exports to China on the left and the EU on the right. And what you can see is just a slightly different footprint with different volumes and different municipalities. And if we delineate the river basins, we can start summing things up at the macro level, at the meso level, and then link that to water scarcity on the ground. So this is just a different version of that, where we've now summed these volumes. And this is now both green and blue water, showing the reliance of China on Brazilian river basins at 164 cubic kilometers. And you can see that 80% of that volume is focused on or concentrated in 4 river basins. If we focus on the blue portion, because the majority of consumption is green water, we can look at the blue water now, which is 3 cubic kilometers, and 17% of that water is associated with river basins that experience critical or high water scarcity in Brazil, especially the São Francisco, which you can see is mostly irrigation for soy. We can do the same for the EU, which relies on 34 cubic kilometers of water coming out of Brazilian river basins, also focused on 4 main river basins. And in this case, it's half of the blue water exports that are associated with high or critical water scarcity in Brazil. So this is just really an initial step in the direction of including virtual water trade and trace. And we're really asking ourselves now, what's the policy anchor? Are we interested in reliance? Are we interested in risks? Are we interested in perhaps diplomacy? And this is kind of the conversation I'm looking forward to have with you today in this session. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ian Knight. I lead Water Thinking for Mars. Mars is a global pet care and snacking company. Liz asked me 3 questions, really all to do about understanding supply chain water impacts, and then how that understanding can add value, and then finally what things can be done to amp up the value that's being generated. So Mars has a quantitative value chain context-based water target. Oh, I'm being waved at for not speaking into the microphones. I've got a loud voice, so often I can get away without the microphones. Yeah, so we have this context-based target. And what does that mean? Well, we look at all of the catchments that we have operations in, so either factories or sourcing agricultural materials. And we look to those which are irrigated, stressed, and then we look to reduce our usage in proportion to the stress level in those catchments. We call this unsustainable water, and we target to eliminate it in the long run and halve it in the short term. But we have a problem with livestock, because livestock is really all about the feed the animals are eating, and that's 98% of the impacts, of the water impacts of livestock come from the feed. But we don't know where that feed is coming from, what that feed actually is, or in what quantity. So when you have a context-based water target that's all about local stress conditions, you can't include those livestock impacts actually in the target. So we haven't done up until now. And it's not the most important thing. It's about something like 1/8 of our overall water, but it's something that we want to improve and to build our understanding of. So we've been working with WRI and Liz and the team over the last 3 years to help us to build a level of understanding of this water use. So we've been particularly looking at 6 materials that our pet food business buys. They're protein sources that we put into our pet food, generally speaking byproducts from human food chains. And we've been looking to the 6,000 locations where we buy these materials from around the world to understand which are the most impactful from a water point of view. So we've got an approach that's been developed, that's been a lot of work to develop. It's computationally heavy. We've provided to WRI what we buy, where we buy it from, in what quantity, and what the supply shed radius is over which we buy it. And then WRI have been using a variety of secondary data sources to create a model that allows us to understand our water impacts. So that model is bringing in all sorts of information. So water use for each commodity that we're talking about and each material. It's using land use data. It's using trade data. And what it provides us with is a picture of where our unsustainable water use is, which materials we're likely to be buying, and which are the most impactful. And we found that corn in the United States and corn from France is really what's driving our livestock water usage. More than half is from those 2 materials in those 2 locations, with other material location pairs not being material particularly on their own. So what does that mean? Well, it's about poultry materials, particularly chicken meal. We buy an awful lot of chicken meal to put in our pet food. That's what's really driving our livestock water impacts. But when you compare it to the cereals, the nuts, and the oils that we're buying, it's about 10% of our overall footprint. And just from a technical side of things, how you do the allocation from a life cycle analysis point of view is hugely impactful to the end result. So we've actually been working on those cereals, nuts and oils since 2017, when we set our context-based water target. You can see on this chart a little bit of the progress that we're making. We found that 5 materials in 5 countries are more than 80% of our unsustainable footprint. Rice and corn and wheat, almonds and mint from India, Pakistan, United States. It's sort of the same countries are being referenced by the speakers, Spain and Australia. So those are the places we're particularly working with particular programs, and we're steadily reducing this unsustainable water usage as a business. So an example of one of the programs that we do is from northern Spain. We have a family of products, Wrigley Gum, where mint is a key ingredient, and we have a program called Tube Mint, where we're working with farmers. 22,000 farmers have been trained since this program started in something like 2016, and we're training in improved agronomy. How more mint can be grown, how yields can be increased with more crop per drop, reducing our water impacts and increasing particularly income for smallholder farmers. So that's one of the examples of value that can be created. So moving on to changes, things that can help manage virtual water. We have a brand in Europe called Ben's Original. It's a rice brand, and we've historically sourced that rice from the margins of the Guadalquivir River, south of Seville. And Spain, as many of us are aware, is undergoing various forms of drought in recent times, and you can see on the little chart here the excess of usage compared to supply in the Guadalquivir River system. The pictures show the left and right margin of the river where rice is cultivated. In 2022 in full supply, in 2020 in full supply, 2021, the drought meant that the authorities applied restrictions in the amount of water that could be withdrawn from the river for irrigation. Those restrictions were increased further in 2022. Last year, no rice could be grown. Because such was the level of the drought, and unfortunately this year more rice can be grown. So we can see the effect of regulation, and this is good for us as a rice buyer because we know that the issue of water is being managed and well managed, and we can see the evidence from the pictures to show, and this is something that Tina mentioned, the importance of moving from voluntary to regulated and making sure the regulation works, which these satellite pictures sort of show. So moving on to the technical side, so rice is a hugely impactful crop globally from a water point of view. Initiatives like the Sustainable Rice Platform are extremely beneficial in terms of delivering on a stacked range of benefits, from greenhouse gas to water to societal impacts. So Mars is highly supportive of initiatives like that, particularly with regard to our rice buy. My slide hasn't quite come through as I'd wanted, but data availability is useful. I mean, we couldn't have done the modelling of our water livestock without the availability of the data that we've needed to do the work. And the better and higher quality data that comes through right the way across the board from trade to water stress is hugely beneficial as we seek to establish what sort of work we need to be doing and where we need to do it. And then finally, when we set our sustainable targets as a business, it's all in excess of a sustainable threshold in a catchment. And we tend to use a globally accepted average of 40%, unless we have better information. And we see going forward the importance of catchment by catchment, sustainable thresholds being set that are relevant to that catchment, that define and include aspects like climate change, and this example from California is one where the challenges of climate change in California and as they affect the water system are being talked about and included in dialogue, in this case from the governor of California. So this is a direction that we need to be going in, and these watershed by watershed we need to be applying different thresholds and then responding accordingly. That's all I wanted to cover. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shanur from Deltares. Liz asked me to mobilize a conversation on what is water efficiency and for whom. To do justice to her question and a discussion that we can have here today, I thought of sharing two cases, one from Bangladesh and another from Peru. I originally come from Bangladesh, so I perhaps would be able to do more justice to the case. And the Peruvian case comes from former colleagues from IHE Delft. So to move on, with the case from Bangladesh, which is the global value chain, related to the global value chain. So the Bangladesh leather industry, the global value chain attached to it, is an integral part. It forms an integral part of the global value chain of raw materials and finished products. The industry has contributed to the national economy $154 million by exporting raw hides and leathers. This global value chain of the leather industry in Bangladesh involves middlemen, local suppliers of raw materials, tanneries, local manufacturers, and foreign buyers. The middlemen, including the collectors, suppliers, and wholesalers, only cause increments in costs, but they do not contribute to value-added activities. And the governance of this global value chain of this leather industry is quite hierarchical. This is because, for three dominating reasons, identified the Center for Policy Dialogue in Bangladesh. One, the complex nature of transactions, challenges in standardizing this form of transactions, the informal forms of transactions, and the limited capabilities in the supply base. This global value chain of the Bangladesh leather industry is also characterized by outdated technology and infrastructure, low wage, poor working conditions, unsafe labor working environment, and high level of pollution. I thought of share a glimpse of this level of pollution that has been caused by processing of these raw hides and leathers. The leather industry, the leather processing industry in Bangladesh, which is located mainly in the capital, has contributed to the killing of the river, which is also the lifeline of the capital, the river Buriganga. The water during the dry season is pitch black and has no dissolved oxygen. In a study carried out, in a series of studies carried out during a time period of 2011 and 2017, which I was also a part of, the study identified that these the waste of this leather shavings and raw hides contain chromium and along with other heavy metals, and the research identified the presence of hexavalent chromium, which has been identified as a human carcinogen. And these wastes have sort of found its own way and created another value chain. That is a key ingredient in producing fish feeds and poultry feeds. So what has been happening is that this hexavalent chromium got bioaccumulated in certain food chains. For example, in the farm chicken and specific cultivated species, including tilapia, which is a major protein source for people with marginal income. Moving on from Bangladesh to Peru, in Motupe Valley in Peru, mango, along with some other crop items like avocados and grapes, has become one of the steadily growing agro-export item. The water needed to irrigate the mangoes are brought from across the Andean mountain range. And these mangoes are cultivated mostly by smallholder farmers, and they are exported to places including United Kingdom and the Netherlands. An actual trade in this virtual water seems to go mostly in opposite directions, from a very arid regions to places that are water abundant or water rich. So the market does not apparently follow the comparative advantage as far as water is concerned. In 2015, The water footprint, which is an attractive and easy way to improve the water consciousness of consumers and public at large, became an integral pillar of Peruvian national water resource strategies and policies. The Peruvian National Water Authority, ANA, issued a decree that offers farmers the opportunity to obtain a blue water certificate if they agree to have their water footprints measured and if they commit to use the water efficiently and sustainably in future. The research that I was talking about showed that farmers were not all that interested to obtain a blue water certificate. Why? Because they believed that their irrigation logic is already premised on using the water in wisest possible way. Zooming into a family, farming family, Obando family, this research shows that most of these smallholder farms are located in a very arid region where water availabilities are highly variable and difficult to predict. And their irrigation strategies have evolved over centuries to make most of the available rain and irrigation water. However, in the eyes of engineers and authority who are responsible to evaluate on-farm irrigation water efficiency and handing the blue water certificate, these water practices represent old-fashioned, traditional, and wasteful peasant farming. I must say here that by presenting the cases in Peru, my intention is not to demean or glorify one water efficiency concept over another. By sharing these two cases, I would like to draw your attention to the importance and need of revisiting what do we understand of water efficiency when the water efficiency, the ideas or practices are diverse and distinct across the world in different geophysical, socio-cultural, and governance structures, and for whom this water efficiency are useful and to what extent. In the Bangladesh case, we can see that there are room for more attention to ecological and social well-being, rather than prioritizing the economic benefits. It also suggests accountability to make an integral part of our understanding of global value chain. In the case of Peru, the virtual water, trade of virtual water, suggests that often the water efficiency, the dominating ideas of water efficiency comes with preconceived notions of modernity, growth, and development, and also sometimes examples of best practices. By doing that, what happens is that in the process, it runs risk of eroding traditional water wisdom and limits pluralizing different ideas and practices of water efficiency that have worked well in certain cases over these dominating ideas of water efficiency. So thank you, Lise, for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to have a conversation with you all. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Shanur. Thank you to all the speakers, and also thank you to all of you for showing up the first session, 9 a.m. on a Sunday. We were sort of taking bets beforehand to see how many people would come, and did not expect the room to be this full. Maybe that says more about me than it says about all of you. But we're just really thrilled to be having this conversation. I think what we tried to do is look at this really thorny question of virtual water, which at once is both sort of abstract, but also is really incredibly meaningful in understanding interrelations between questions of food security and economic development and sovereignty and corporate social, all these different pieces coming together. And really trying to focus on one aspect of that, the sort of traceability question as an entry point for the conversation. So I've just really appreciate all of our speakers who have already started to unpack that for us, unravel that question, and we're going to do a little bit more of that, but we're going to invite you into the conversation. So Liz, I'm going to ask you in a second how long people have, but first, does it say up there?
Next slide.
Next, oh yeah, that's a, you don't need to look at that anymore. I'll ask you in a second how long the participants will have, but we have a set of questions that we've been thinking about in terms of what are different parts of the conversation that are a roadmap to help move forward. So the first question is just about principles. So let's start with first principles. What principles might we consider when thinking about water embedded in complex supply chains, and specifically how does that connect to the questions of traceability and transparency? I'm thinking this section here, you can sit at your own tables, but combined tables, if you're at a smaller one, can sort of focus in on that question. The second question is about thinking about what are we tracing? What are we considering, and using the deforestation-free supply chains as a counterexample in the forest sector. But this is a question that I think Mark and I'm going to combine the two of you, Mark and Rick online, can take with the people online. Hello to the people online as well. Thank you for joining on a Sunday morning. The third question is around data and tools. What data and tools are needed to ensure sustainable and equitable supply chains? So I'm thinking this section here on that question. I might even combine it with I'm going to combine it with the company's initiatives question, and then this group over here, this group of tables, thinking about what does a research agenda look like? What research is needed to better understand the challenge, to better understand the opportunities for traceability options within for more sustainable and equitable supply chains. So we're going to have insert time here, 10 minutes? 15 minutes, amazing. We have 15 minutes. And if you don't like the question you've been assigned, you can move yourself. And then we'll have some volunteers from different tables can share the conversation that they had. So go for it.
And press go. So let's give it to the table first.
Yeah.
Press go on the timer. So can you say the sections one more time?
Yeah. Principles, online is definition, over here is data and corporate initiatives, data and tools and corporate initiatives, and then this section over here is research agenda. Cool? Any questions? No? 1-minute warning. Okay. Thank you all so much for joining the conversation. We're going to pull back to the center. So we have some fantastic helpers who have microphones. And I think I'm going to start over here on the principles section. I know I'm cutting you guys off. I'm so sorry. We're almost at time. So here we go. We're going to start over here on the principles section. We'd just like to hear any top reflections from the group about where your discussion went.
She's just asking where are we in terms of the discussion.
All right. On behalf of this group, what we discussed is that some of the elements of the principles could be the prioritizing human ecological interdependencies, redistributions of profits, and the premises of that principle could be relate to a question of rights, justice, and equity. And we're also thinking about how should these principles guide efforts, and for that we thought about water accounting with methods like transparency protocol, data availability and sharing, and water adjustment mechanisms. And have I missed anything, group? Any quick reflection?
No, it's perfect.
Okay, I did my perfect job.
Perfect. Fantastic. I'm looking at my WI colleagues to make sure that we captured all of that. Mark, we're good? Amazing, amazing. Okay, we're going to go next to the group online. I don't know if Rick is able to unmute himself and share if there was a bit of a conversation online.
Yes, we had a very 21st century-like conversation. We simply hijacked the chat. So if if you read along in the chat, you can have a literal transcribe of what we discussed. So we tried to find a definition for deforestation-free supply chains, but then for water. I think we tried to interpret that a little bit as a water sustainable supply chain, right? What would be the definition of that? What kind of criteria or aspects would something like that entail? And topics that came up included ecological damage done, right? Or species affected in aquatic ecosystems. So that speaks a little bit to the water scarcity estimates, efficiency of water use, but also benefits or burdens experienced by local communities where the production takes place. There were some thoughts about, however, the context of these definitions. If we come up with some calculation rules, also what Shanur and Ian spoke to in their presentations, the importance of context in setting local targets or definitions. is a proxy that we are using sufficient? Or are the boundaries for the calculations clear enough so that we can actually incorporate them in the definition? So I think great ideas that we can really digest a little bit to come up with an as clear definition as we have for deforestation free. And all that from the chat. So shout out for everyone to improvise with me on that.
Fantastic, Rick, and all of you online. A very rich discussion, it sounds like, and I will look forward to reading the transcript later as well. Okay, the data and tools, and then company initiatives group, I believe, is here. Keen to hear your reflections.
Yes, on behalf of this group, we talked about scale, starting with what seems to be obvious, perhaps just installing a water meter seems to be sort of the logical first step, but then we realized that's not necessarily scalable in all countries. And so we talked about scale, the role of remote sensing, for instance, for more macro level analyses, the level of traceability, plot level versus jurisdictional level, and the data that's available here and now to actually start providing the evidence base to inform policy decisions. We also talked about tools and the importance of having the tools openly available and usable by farmers, because otherwise we miss the opportunity to collaborate with them and engaging with them and leading to positive change on the ground effectively. Would anyone want to add anything in this group?
I think we were getting onto policy at the end, and how policy can be influenced, and the importance of influencing policy, and then but then the complexity of that, with farmers being a big constituency, and the need, and we talked a bit about wealth and wealth creation and the importance of income and stacked benefits from interventions that can address both smallholder farmer income and water resource availability, but just the complexity of moving to a situation where that can be delivered, as a result with policy in place. And so I think, and then we're beginning to think about politics and how that comes into play at the end. Have we missed anything? Just looking around. No, I think that's our input. Thanks.
Okay, this group over here.
Okay, so we also addressed the question on data and tools, and I thought it was a really fruitful conversation, actually adding to your conversation, because we looked more at the perspective from the farmer, from the end user, and we thought that, for example, the question like, is the farmer actually willing to pay to get that insight, where we actually had quite a, I thought, interesting conversation on what is actually insight. Because in many cases, insight differs from your background, your perspective, where you are, and we also noticed that the farmers, they have very limited time. They have usually very little margin, hence very little money, and so it needs to be really easy, and it needs to be available continuously for them to. Again, if there is insight, to actually apply the insights into their daily operations. So I think that was one, important insight. I think a question that you posed is some clarity on how is it actually measured. And so how do we measure the data and the tools, and how is that provided? Again, what did I miss? No. Apparently I didn't miss a thing.
All right, and our final, wrapping it up, our final group on the research agenda. We'll write up this research agenda afterwards. We'll get some funding for it. We'll all participate. What is it going to be?
We had a good discussion. I think it touched on a lot of the points that were raised by some of the other groups. So this research agenda also needs to consider, in addition to the quantity at the catchment scale, but also to make sure it's incorporating water quality is important. For water footprinting. One of the main challenges to unpack in future research is the lack of capacity by catchment organizations to monitor and then use the data. Along with that, I think building on this point of the capacity for smallholder farmers to either adopt new tools or technologies to improve that kind of data collection, but really understand. I think this also gets back to the point around principles in terms of equity and inclusion. That all this is time and resource intensive. So the burden that it does place on smallholder farmers does then present a challenge in terms of the scalability. And a final one that was brought up is around regulation. And that, researcher in looking at what are the successes that EUDR and other upcoming regulation that can help drive that transparency. Anything else? Great. All right. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. So we set out this agenda trying to understand water embedded in complex supply chains, and I think we understand more how it is complex, but also more what we can center within understanding that complexity, including the social ecological context, including centering farmers, included in producers, and the sort of many different dimensions of this issue. So thank you all. I don't know if any of the other speakers had any final comment that they wanted to make, but otherwise, thank you all for joining this morning and for participating fully, and we really appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy Water Week.